Before Lucifer fell, he was the most perfect being God ever created, not just an angel. The angel, the one closest to the throne. The most beautiful, the most intelligent, the most gifted creature in all of existence. And he looked at all of that and decided it wasn't enough. That one decision is one of the most psychologically disturbing moments in all of recorded human history. Because what happened to Lucifer doesn't just describe a fallen angel, it describes a mind, a very specific type of mind, one that still walks among us every single day. This is the dark psychology of Lucifer's mind. When psychologists study the most dangerous personality structures, there's one combination that rises above all others. They call it the dark tetrad, 4 traits: narcissism, psychopathy, Machiavellianism, sadism. Lucifer's profile matches every single one, but the trait that started everything there before the rebellion, before the war, and before the fall was something more specific. Grandiose narcissism. In simple terms, it means this: he didn't just want to be great, he needed to be the greatest, and the moment that need wasn't being met, something inside him broke. Psychologists call it a narcissistic injury. Think of it as this. Imagine building your entire identity around being the best, and then one day, someone reminds you there's someone above you. For most people, that stings. Maybe you feel embarrassed. Maybe you feel insecure. For Lucifer, it started a war, but that's only the surface, because what he did next is where it gets truly disturbing. Isaiah 14 verses 13 and 14 records the exact words from inside Lucifer's mind. 5 statements, 5 times the same word. I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the mount of assembly. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. 5 times. I will, I will, I will. You know what that sounds like? It sounds like someone who has already made up their mind, someone who isn't asking. They're declaring. Psychologists call this entitlement thinking. In simple words, the belief that you deserve something, regardless of any authority, any rule, or any boundary that stands in the way. Here's what makes this so psychologically fascinating, though. Lucifer wasn't wrong about his own power. He was gifted. He was brilliant. He was the most capable being in existence. The problem wasn't what he had. The problem was what he thought he deserved because of it. That's the most dangerous kind of pride, because you can't argue with it. You can't correct it, because it's partially true. And that's exactly what made what he did next so effective. This is the part that most people skip over, and it's the most psychologically revealing thing in the entire story. Revelation 12:4 tells us that when Lucifer fell, 1/3 of all the angels fell with him. 1/3. Think about that for a second. These weren't ignorant people. These were supernatural, intelligent beings who lived in the literal presence of God. And Lucifer convinced them to commit the worst decision in cosmic history. How? He didn't use force. He didn't threaten anyone. He planted a question. The same question he used later on Eve. Did God really say? See, he didn't tell the angels that God was evil. He just made them start asking whether God was fair. That's the difference. And it's massive. Psychologists call this coercive persuasion. In plain terms, manipulation that doesn't command, it corrupts. It doesn't attack what you believe. It makes you doubt it. Slowly. He didn't change their minds. He changed the questions they were asking. If you've ever been in a relationship or a friendship or a job where someone slowly made you question everything you once trusted without ever giving you a clear reason why, you were dealing with someone operating from Lucifer's exact playbook. But none of that explains where this all started. And the origin is the darkest part of all. Ezekiel 28 gives us something most people miss completely. The origin. Verse 17. Your heart became proud on account of your beauty, and you corrupted your wisdom because of your splendor. Read that again. Slowly. His heart became proud on account of his beauty. In other words, the very gifts he was given became the weapon that destroyed him. Psychologists call this contingent self-worth. Simpler version, your entire sense of value depends on being seen as superior. The moment that's threatened, even slightly, it doesn't just hurt your feelings. It feels like you're dying. And here's the painful truth in this. Lucifer's beauty was real. His wisdom was real. His gifts were genuinely extraordinary. But he made the fatal mistake of becoming those things instead of simply having them. When your identity is your talent, what happens when someone is more talented? When your identity is your beauty, what happens when someone is more beautiful? When your identity is being the best, what happens when God exists? The pride didn't come after the fall. The pride was the fall. And what makes it truly terrifying, is that he never stopped, even when he knew exactly how it would end. Here's the most disturbing psychological fact about Lucifer. He knows the ending. Revelation 20:10 describes his final defeat in complete detail. The Bible, the very text that records his own story, tells him and everyone reading it that he loses, completely, finally, permanently. And he keeps going anyway. Why would one of the most intelligent minds ever created continue a war he knows he can't win? Psychology has an answer. Have you ever argued with someone long after you knew you were wrong, just because stopping felt worse than continuing? That moment when you knew you were wrong, but you kept going anyway, because admitting it felt unbearable. That's called the sunk cost fallacy. In simple terms, you keep going not because you believe you'll win, but because you've already invested too much to stop. Lucifer has invested everything. His position, his relationship with God, a third of heaven, his entire identity. To stop now would mean looking back at all of that and saying I was wrong. From the very beginning, for a mind like his, that's not just painful, it's psychologically impossible. He is not fighting God. He is fighting the admission of his own failure. That is the true prison of Lucifer's mind. But here's what nobody talks about. Because the worst part of this story isn't about Lucifer at all. Everything we just described, the grandiosity, the inability to accept being second, the manipulation through doubt, the refusal to stop even when defeat is guaranteed, the identity built entirely on being superior. You have seen this in a human being. Maybe it was a parent who could never, not even once, say, I was wrong. Maybe it was a partner who every single time they lost an argument, somehow turned it around and made it your fault. Maybe it was a friend who slowly made you doubt yourself, not by attacking you, but by asking just the right questions. Maybe it was a leader in a company, in a church, in a country who was genuinely brilliant, but couldn't handle anyone questioning their authority. Or maybe, and I want you to sit with this one for a moment, maybe you recognize something in yourself, that moment when you knew you were wrong and kept arguing anyway. That moment when someone got something you deserved, and instead of feeling happy for them, something dark moved inside you. That moment when you helped someone, and it bothered you that they didn't recognize it enough. The Bible calls it the spirit of pride. Psychology calls it narcissistic thinking. They've been describing the same thing for thousands of years. The reason Lucifer's story is still being told after all this time is not because it happened in heaven. It's because it keeps happening. In marriages, in families, in offices, in churches, in governments. Every time a gifted person decides that accountability is beneath them, the pattern repeats. Lucifer was not the first proud being in the universe. He was just the original. So what is the dark psychology of Lucifer's mind? It is the psychology of a being who had everything and destroyed all of it because his mind could not process the existence of something greater than himself. It is the psychology of beauty that became identity, of gift that became entitlement, of intelligence that became a prison, and it is the psychology of a war that still continues, not because of belief in victory, but because the only thing that could end it requires something that mind will never produce: humility. The most dangerous mind in biblical history wasn't dangerous because it was evil. It was dangerous because it was brilliant and broken in exactly the right way. If this video made you think of someone in your life, drop their name in the comments or save this video because you will recognize this again in someone close to you, maybe sooner than you think. Next, we go inside the mind of someone even more disturbing, a man who spent 3 years next to Jesus, who saw miracles happen with his own eyes, who was trusted with the money of the ministry and still sold him. for 30 pieces of silver. Judas Iscariot. His profile is coming. If you made it this far, you already know this channel is different. No preaching, no judgment, just the dark truth behind the most dangerous minds ever recorded in Scripture. Subscribe, because next week, we go somewhere even dark.